Your weekly show for Waynesburg Athletics. Welcome to another episode of Jacket Sports Weekly here on WCTV. I'm your host for today, Caleb Yauger. Today I'm joined at the desk by Logan Lepiscopo. We're going to break down the end of the football season, going into men's basketball and women's basketball, along with wrestling as well. Let's first talk about the football team for Waynesburg University. Ended the season 4-6 with a 56-0 shutout on the losing side, obviously, against Washington and Jefferson College. Thomas Burke got the start for the Waynesburg Yellow Jackets, but Logan, just an overall lackluster performance from this team. Ended the season on a 3-game losing streak. Positives and negatives from the season as well, but definitely not the way you wanted to end it this particular season.
Absolutely. As being the football analyst for the year here on Jacket Sports Weekly, I will say that it's a much improved from last season as far as record-wise goes and just overall a team standard goes. Obviously, you don't want to lose your last 3 games of the season, not 3 big conference games as well, but to say the least, I'm very proud of what the team was able to put together, and I think that they should be as well.
Yeah, at the end of the game yesterday, they were without Tyler Raines, Dakota Romantito, Chase Nico Matty. He had a really bad injury to his leg that he suffered, the second quarter, I believe?
I believe it was the second quarter, and it actually turned out that he broke his leg, so complete, clean break in his leg. So hope for a speedy recovery, and hopefully he can be back next year for the team.
And, you've been the analyst, like you said, throughout the football season. What are some of the things that they're going to take into next year in order to build from this season that, they went 4-6, doubled their win total from last year?
Well, obviously they're going to be losing some of those big senior players, Tyler Raines, Justin Flack, Jesse Kane, just to name a few. But I think overall what Coach Coleman was able to bring in was kind of a culture shock to the team. They weren't used to this. I wouldn't say not used to a winning mentality, but what Coach Coleman was able to bring in completely obviously flipped a switch in the players' heads, and they went from a below-average team to actually being potential contenders in the President's Athletic Conference. So I think if these young guys can continue to step up, do their thing, that Waynesburg is going to have a lot of success in the up-and-coming years.
Winter sports are officially here at Waynesburg University. We're going to head over to men's basketball to the court. They play at the Rudy Marisa Fieldhouse last Tuesday. They lost to Kenyon College 71-54. Matt Popek led the way for the Yellow Jackets in his final season with this squad. He went 17 points, 5 rebounds, 1 for 5 from 3. One of only 2 threes that Waynesburg combined for in that game, while the Kenyon College Owls hit 11 threes in that game and ran with it for the second half.
Yeah, absolutely, Caleb. You mentioned the 3-point shooting. It was horrendous for Waynesburg, and the defense was also pretty bad as far as Waynesburg goes. But I think from a first game standpoint, it's not a conference game, so it's not the biggest deal that the team took this loss. Obviously, a 17-point loss is not what you want to see, especially on a season opener and a home opener to be that. But I think overall, from a team perspective, we all expect Matt Popek take his shots, get his points, his usual double digits, but the rest of the guys around him really need to step up. And yes, it's the first game of the season, not the end of the world, but we need to see continuous team effort here if they want to be legitimate President's Athletic Conference contenders.
Anthony Testa for the Kenyon College Owls, he led the team with 19 points, and we got a good idea of what the starting 5 is going to look like for Waynesburg with Matt Popek, Bryson Wilt, Jansen Knotts, Jake Scheidt, and Ryan Fellberg, and also John Tastinger and Anton Baker. They both contributed 20 minutes apiece in that contest. But for the men's team, this upcoming schedule is pretty hard, not going to lie. 4 conference games in a row, starting conference games a little bit earlier than usual. First Chatham this Wednesday at 8, and then Bethany, Teal, and Westminster, and then they will follow up with a home game against St. Vincent. Now on to women's basketball. They also started the season 0-1. Last Tuesday, instead of being at home, they traveled to Cleveland, Ohio to take on the Case Western Reserve University Spartans. 5 different Spartans scored double digits, and the 94-48 victory for Case Western just really showed, Waynesburg has a lot to work on, especially with the young core that this team has.
Absolutely. You bring up the fact that Waynesburg allowed all those double-digit scores. That's not something you want to see, especially in the opening game. Yes, you're on the road against a very good Case Western basketball team, but I wouldn't say the defense would be the main issue that I would look for. I would say it's more of the team's shooting percentage. The team in this game shot 24.2% through 4 quarters of basketball. You're simply not going to win many games shooting like that. So Waynesburg, offensively and defensively, obviously have a little bit of rust on the gears, so hopefully they'll be able to figure that out as the season progresses.
Avery Robinson led the way for Waynesburg with 11 points and 4 rebounds. Waynesburg 7 of 25 from 3, not too shabby like you said, but like you said, about 24.2% from the floor from field goal range. I mean, that's something that you definitely have to work on. But they also scrimmaged against Robert Morris University, a Division I program, this past Saturday. 95-39 loss, but Clara Page Miller, one of the freshmen on this team for Waynesburg, she contributed 15 points, so a solid performance from her.
Absolutely. You mentioned the big loss. It's a Division I program. It's a scrimmage. It doesn't go towards the record. It's not the end of the world that Waynesburg took such a beating in this game, to say the least, but seeing that performance from a freshman shows a lot of potential for the Waynesburg team. And it's not just that she scored 15 points. She also shot 5 for 5 from the field, 2 for 2 from three-pointers, and she made majority of her free throws. So there's a lot of potential for her, and I think this team has a lot of potential moving forward with this freshman class that Sam Jones was able to bring in.
Yeah, absolutely. This Wednesday, the men's team is also taking on Chatham. The women's team is first game to go at 6 o'clock, and the men are following at 8, that doubleheader in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Now we're going over to wrestling, to the mats. 18th place in the W&J Invitational this past Saturday. A little bit of a shaky start. They placed 11th out of 11 teams the weekend before at the Ned McGinley Invitational, but Harley Constable has been a shining star for this program so far in the season.
Yeah, so far I would definitely say he's been that shining star, as you would word it, but I think a lot of this wrestling team is going to be with the new coach. We saw at the end of last year the head coach for the wrestling team had retired, bring in a new guy from Lock Haven University, so maybe potentially having a guy with some wrestling experience collegiately in that upper NCAA division, that perhaps he can bring in some tips and pointers that the guys perhaps wouldn't have had previously. So I expect this wrestling team to do fairly well and hopefully improve from last season.
Harley Constable, one of the main performers like we talked about, he was knocked into the consolation bracket this past Saturday, but he won 3 straight matches but came just short of the placement rounds for the competition. Seth Evans posted a 2-2 mark at 149 pounds. Ryan Bachar and Kyle Heinerman went 2-2 on the day. The Waynesburg duels are coming up this Saturday for the Waynesburg wrestling team. They'll take on RIT, Shippensburg, and Messiah at 11 o'clock, 12:30, and 2 p.m. Well, when we come back on Jacket Sports Weekly, we're going to be covering some men's basketball, so don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Jacket Sports Weekly here on WCTV. Men's basketball is on the table. So here to join us is Joe Veneziale. Going to talk about some men's hoops. 0-1 to start the season. They lost to Kenyon College last Tuesday, 71-54. So let's get some of your thoughts on that first contest.
Yeah, Caleb, like you said, 71-54. Kind of a tough start for the Waynesburg University men's basketball team. But the big thing for me is that Matt Popek leading the team in points, 17 points, 5 rebounds. It's just we got to get better shot selection throughout the whole entire team. They are great defensively. They were a great defensive team last year, but nonetheless, we got to turn that defensive points into offensive points and really get things going on the play side of the offensive side of the ball. But it's just Matt Popek cannot be the floor general the whole time. We got to move the ball. And another thing, size is a big loss for this Waynesburg team. They're just getting out-rebounded, Caleb. On the Kenyon side of the ball, David Mason, 12 rebounds in this game. And it's not a good look for this team, especially with the schedule they have coming up.
So, Joe, you mentioned that Matt Popek led the team in scoring. We are typically seeing that from last season and now obviously carrying over to our first game this year. But as far as shot selection goes, you mentioned it needs to be better. 22.2% from three-point range. What do you have to say as far as, being better in that aspect of just shooting in general?
Yeah, I mean, you bring it up, 22%, not a good percentage by any means necessary. But, I mean, we weren't a very great three-point team last year, but it's just really getting the ball to different people. And we had Najon Kirkman last year down low, getting those points inside, getting those rebounds, but they have to spread the floor in this case right now with the players that they have with Knott, Scheidt, and Felberg. But it's just we need to move the ball and get open in space where we can get those high percentage shots. And nonetheless, excuse me, I always say threes are better than twos. It's just the name of the game. But it's just we have to get those better shot selections for the open man because now we have to spread the floor.
So the starting five that we saw on on Tuesday was Popek, Wilt, Knotts, Scheidt, and Felberg. Now the 6 and 7 guys were Tastinger and Baker. They came off the bench and produced 20 points apiece, like we mentioned earlier. What do you think of this dynamic so far? Who do you think are the key players that are going to contribute throughout the rest of the season?
Yeah, like you said, the 6 and 7, Caleb, Tastinger and Baker. They just really have to come off the bench and produce what they have been doing in years past and this year by far. Especially, we had Anton Baker coming off the bench last year and Jake Scheidt. Jake Scheidt getting that starting role in this year because he's a great player and gets those percentages high and is a great role player. But nonetheless, we just got to have those guys step up like they did last year.
So when you look at this game, scoring-wise, you have to look at a 5-point deficit going into halftime, and then Kenyon just kind of blew the doors open against Waynesburg. So in that aspect of keeping it close in the first half and then coming into the second half, kind of getting what some people say blown out as far as losing by 12 points in that second half, how can a team come out and continue that, momentum from keeping it close in the first half and then moving into the second half?
Yeah, we just got to finish strong. Pretty much. I mean, the boards do not help by any means. I mean, you getting the offensive and defensive rebounds on the respective sides of each ball, but nonetheless, it's just we have to finish strong, especially on the schedule coming up, like Caleb alluded to earlier. Bethany, Teal, Westminster, and St. Vincent. St. Vincent being the number one in the PAC right now. And it's just we have to finish strong against these teams especially. But nonetheless, to show out what they did in this game right now against Kenyon, they just got to turn it on the opposite side of its head. We got to get going, got to get the guys in the right shots, and we have to get those rebounds to get those points turned into the finish of the game.
Now, we know this team is a really, really good scoring defense, one of the best scoring defenses in the entire country in terms of Division III basketball. Now, 71-54, 71 points, that's actually not a whole lot when you consider, how many points can be scored in a basketball game. If you look at like W&J scores, for example, they beat teams, high 90s to a low 90 score. I mean, last year Waynesburg was able to limit W&J in terms of scoring, but the thing is, you only score 54 points. In last year's home opener against Oberlin, you only allow 45 points, but you only score 42 or whatever it was. What do you make of all of this?
It's like I said before, it's all just comes back to the boards. We got to get those offensive rebounds to turn into those points on the offensive side of the ball. And we got to, we get the turnovers from the defensive scoring that we have had, but we just have to turn it on the opposite side. Get those offensive looks, get those high percentage shots, and score points when we have the ball and not just solely hold in on those turnovers.
So you and Caleb alluded to the upcoming schedule, 4 conference games, 4 road conference games. How important is it going to be for Waynesburg to be able to snag a couple of these games on the road and get that conference record in order to make an appearance as a high seed in the PAC playoffs?
Yeah, we got to make a splash, pretty much, to start off the season, especially against these conference opponents. I mean, nonetheless, we had a great game against Kenyon, nonetheless. We did lose 71-54, but to turn it around and get this start that we need against the conference, especially when Waynesburg finished 4th in the conference last year and St. Vincent being at the top of the helm, if they can get to that top spot early, I see this being a great season. For
Men's basketball with Joe Veneziale. When we come back, we're going to cover women's basketball next right here on Jacket Sports Weekly.
Have you ever been to the Everly Library? If not, you should, because it's great. They have books of all different genres: history, biography, fiction. Try The Evolution of Life, Life of Pi, or Jurassic Park. So what if books aren't your thing? Try movies like Frozen, or TV shows like Lost. Books and DVDs aren't the only thing though. Take a trip to the 2nd floor. Welcome to the Writing Center. These tutors will tell you everything you need to know about writing a paper, and they'll help revise your essays. Now let's head back down. Behold, the Knox Learning Center. Need to print something out 5 minutes before your next class because you procrastinated? No problem. You can also print off pictures of dogs. Because, well, you can. So grab your homework, laptop, and textbook, and study diligently. Bring your lunch too. Actually, you can't. That's illegal. Now you know the Everly Library. Stop by anytime. Seriously, it's open all week.
Welcome back into Jacket Sports Weekly. We now talk about women's basketball here at Waynesburg University. Our analyst, Brandon Bennett, joining us, making his Jacket Sports Weekly debut. Waynesburg so far has faced off against two very tough opponents, Case Western Reserve and as well Robert Morris. Brandon, let's talk about the Case Western game first. 94 to 48 point loss. What's just your general thoughts about this game?
We have to play better offensively. A big substantial loss there. Avery Robinson didn't look too bad, shooting 4 for 15 in field goal with 17 total points. But then you look at the overall percentage from the team, 24.2% from field goal and only 28% three-point range. We just have to play better basketball offensively and defensively.
So who were some of the other players that you thought stuck out in that game? How did the freshman class do?
The freshman class didn't do too bad. You know, a majority of the team being freshmen, you have those 3,000 point scorers from high school, and especially the one from Waynesburg, Aubrey Burns, 12 points in the game.
So you look at away from the point side of things, move over to, let's say, the rebounding battle. Waynesburg out-rebounded 57 to 42 in this game. What kind of does that say about Waynesburg's lineup stacked up against, say, an opponent like Case Western, or perhaps a team that has a center that's tall enough? Losing Brooke Fuller last year, Waynesburg's missing some height. So how can Waynesburg kind of look to get back into competition with the rebounding battle?
Yeah, you talk about Brooke Fuller, a big key component of last year's team, and then losing, you got to play physical basketball, jump up and get the ball.
So Waynesburg also scrimmaged against Robert Morris, a Division I program, this past Saturday. They lost 95 to 39. Obviously, you probably weren't expecting to win that, but what were some of the takeaways from that, from Waynesburg playing a high-caliber program like that?
Not too terribly sad about this loss. They are a D1 basketball program, already 3-0. The upperclassmen didn't really play the best. Only 3 scores from the upperclassmen. Avery Robinson with 6 points. Anika, only 5. And same with Marley Wolf, only 5 points. The freshmen did outscore them 23 points to 16, which is really good to see with a young, upcoming Waynesburg basketball team here in the women.
So you look a little bit over and from the turnover battle. There's been a ton of turnovers for this team through the first 2 games. Coming into the game against Case Western, 26 team turnovers. And then you go over to Robert Morris and you have 37 team turnovers. Is it because of these high caliber teams that Waynesburg perhaps offensively is not prepared to see defenses like that? Or maybe is it just perhaps kind of careless basketball, careless passes?
I would say it's a little bit of both. I mean, with Case Western, you should be able to play a little bit better. But then like Robert Morris, with them being a D1 program, you're going to kind of expect it. So, I mean, you got to play, like, these are simple mistakes that you got to be better with.
All right, final question. They take on Chatham this Wednesday at 6 o'clock. First home game on November 22nd against Teal, a team that they've usually been able to manage over the years. So just a prediction of what we can expect and some of the keys to this upcoming game against Chatham on Wednesday on the road.
I think this is going to be a way better game for the Waynesburg basketball team. They can finally get in their groove with the young team. I think these freshmen are going to be a key component. Some big players there. And then I think they got to make better shots. They got to rebound the ball, be physical, and just these shots. You got only 29.2% against Robert Morris. I can't say it enough. You got to make smart shots and get them in the basket.
Absolutely. Got to have smarter shots. Got to play better basketball. That is it here for Waynesburg Hoops. But when we come back, Brock Owens will sit down with us and talk about some Waynesburg University wrestling.
God, that was terrible.
debut.
Wrestling is the last topic that we're going to discuss today here on Jacket Sports Weekly, and our usual analyst, Brock Owens, is back with us for another edition of Jacket Sports Weekly to talk about the Waynesburg wrestling program. But a little bit of a struggle, Brock, for the first couple of matches for this team. 11th out of 11 teams in the Ned McGinley Invitational. We all know that it is a very, very competitive match. But 18th place in the W&J Invitational. Just give us some of your general thoughts about who's been performing well and some positives and negatives.
Yeah, so just to hit on a point you said there, the Ned McGinley Invitational is a very tough tournament. So getting 11th out of 11 teams there, I don't view that as a super big deal. There was a couple of bright spots. Of course, Harley Constable, who I do believe is the most impressive wrestler so far on this team. And if I had to make a prediction, I would say he's probably going to have the best season on this team. He looks really good in person. I was there for the black and orange wrestle-offs, and he looked really, really good with a couple of tech falls in that match. But yeah, he picked up a couple of victories at Ned McGinley, and then moving forward to the W&J Invitational, they came in 18th out of 38 teams, so they were a little bit above halfway there, so they performed a little bit better. Harley Constable was able to pick up 4 victories. He came up just short of being able to place at that tournament. Seth Evans picked up a couple of victories, along with a couple of other people on this team that I think is going to be a little bit better moving forward.
So you talk about Harley Constable. You think he will be the most impressive wrestler on the team. Talk a little bit more about his W&J. 4-2, as you mentioned, just short of placing in the tournament. But to open things up, a 16-0 tech fall. What does that say about him as a wrestler and perhaps what he can bring for this season?
Yeah, Harley is just a complete wrestler, I think. He really strives not only in the standing position but on top as well, and that's really, really important in college wrestling, especially with the whole riding time factor, and you get an extra point if you can accumulate a minute of riding time. And I think that Harley's going to be able to do that a lot with his with being able to be so good on top, as well as being able to get takedowns from the neutral position. So with that combination, you're really able to put together some good matches and pick up some victories.
Well, we do have to address one issue with this team. Harley Constable, yes, is the top wrestler, but Rocky McGeary no longer a part of this Waynesburg wrestling roster. And, he's been the top performer, not just for Waynesburg, but in the region and, the country as well. He went to nationals before, obviously, COVID-19 canceled that. So what are your thoughts on that as to how they're going to have to adjust for the future?
Yeah, obviously, that's a huge loss. So we all know it. Rocky's been the best wrestler on the team for the last couple of years, but I do think they're going to be fine at heavyweight because they had a really solid backup that was losing to Rocky by a point or two. His name's Trent Patrick. He's a really solid wrestler, and he is in really good condition, and he's really quick for a heavyweight as well. So if he can really get himself going into the season, he could be a solid heavyweight for this Waynesburg team as well.
I just want to add one more thing. Garrett Cook is not wrestling right now, right? Or is he?
No, I don't believe he is.
I don't think
right
he
now.
is. I mean, that's another key part of this Waynesburg team. But go ahead, Logan. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. We got to adjust all the injuries, address them all as we adjust Nick and Maddie's injury in the opening. But moving on to the Waynesburg duels coming up this Saturday, we have a couple very competitive teams, RIT, Shippensburg, and Messiah. What can we expect from Waynesburg in these duels on Saturday?
Listen, it's just going to be pretty tough competition again. So I don't know how well Waynesburg as a team is going to do. So we have to look a little more toward the individual side of things. You know, we're looking for strong performances from Harley Constable, from Seth Evans, from some of the other guys on this team. And if those guys can face some of these really good wrestlers that the other teams have and keep up with them, maybe pick up some tough wins, or if they have the talent advantage in some of these matches, maybe pick up some really solid wins, then that's what we're looking for. As a team, we're going to have to see how it shakes out.
Now, you mentioned Seth Evans, some of those younger guys as well. Have you seen any sort of promise from this freshman class or even sophomore class?
Yeah, there is some solid freshmen in this class. One that really stood out to me at the Orange and Black Wrestle-Offs, like I said, I was there in person for those, was Ryan Bachar. So he picked up a couple of really solid victories. He faced the junior Kyle Heinerman as well as another freshman on this team and picked up 2 really solid victories. And he just looks like a complete wrestler as well to me.
As Logan mentioned, RIT Shippensburg and Messiah will come to the Rudy Marisa Fieldhouse. 11 a.m. is when that first matchup against RIT starts for the Waynesburg University wrestling team. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today here in the studio. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Jacket Sports Weekly. We'll be back same time, same place next week.
This has been a production of Waynesburg Community Television.